It would be nice if I actually remember to turn on my microphone. Good evening, everyone. So this is another lecture in the series for this week. So this particular series, we are talking about the book Biased. And so Biased is a book by Jennifer Eberhardt. She is a scholar from Stanford University. She wrote this book quite some time ago, but the work and the information that's in it is still applicable today. So this is going to be part of the lectures. This lecture is covering pretty much chapters 3 and 4, but we're not going to talk directly about the book. We're going to talk about the concepts that's in the book. And as we kind of get into the concepts in the book, I'll be sharing a few videos of some of the things that have happened over the years, starting back in around 2016 and moving up from there. Also talking about bias amongst police officers, looking into some of those underlying factors, because remember, this class is about roots of racism. It is about the science behind the racism, discrimination, prejudice, all of that. And so this class is the roots of racism. We started about 3 weeks ago, and this is just a continuation. So we are in week 3. Week 1 was just setting the foundations. We got into the definitions of everything, because in order to move through the next weeks, we had to understand that we all had to be on the same understanding of what these terms mean, because there are some people in the class who didn't understand that there was a difference between what prejudice and racism is. And so as we kind of move from there, we understand that, racism is prejudice plus power, for instance, right? Or when you're talking about prejudice, you're talking about, or when you're talking about discrimination, you're talking about this belief plus action. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to move forward with this. I'm giving a few people a chance to kind of get in here. I don't expect a lot of people today, only because I ended up putting this up maybe about an hour ago saying that, hey, I'm going to do a live, but sometimes my time isn't my own. So I still have sick people in the family. I was knocked out earlier with my son because we're still kind of recovering. So I'm just doing whatever I can at the moment, trying to make sure that the information is still out there and that we can actually talk to people and have this discussion, because I don't want you guys to fall behind. I don't want to fall behind, and I want to make sure that there's a lecture out here that addresses this information. Typically, I would do a recorded lecture, but this one is going to be the replacement for my recorded lecture. And so I'm going to still do it somewhat the same way as a recorded lecture, but we're going to just kind of go through this. We're going to hit on some key points, and let's go ahead and go from there. So for those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Tajuddeen Williams. I am a social psychologist, and a lot of things that I focus on tend to be around prejudice, bias, racism, discrimination, populism, climate change denial, religiosity. Those are kind of my main areas. I do a lot of stuff with regards to Black criminality and Black pathology, even within religious communities. So with that being said, let's start. So, when we talk about racism in this country, right, we tend to think of it as something as loud and obvious as, folks in hoods, or signs on doors that say whites only, or policies that explicitly keep people out. And for a long time, that's how it worked. But here's the thing. Today, racism often moves in quieter ways, subtle ways, ways that slip under the radar, that shape every interaction, every decision, in every moment. Now, that's where Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt comes in. This is the book that we were focusing on this week. Bias by Jennifer Eberhardt, chapters 3, 4, 6, and 8. She spent years studying how bias works, not just in the law, not just in policy, but in the split-second choices people make every day. And in Bias, she lays out something that should make all of us stop and think, because it's not just a few bad apples. You have people that will hop on television. They will tell you, oh, this shooting happened because it was a few bad apples, or this event happened because of a few bad apples. If you look at Ahmaud Arbery and what happened down south, it was a few bad apples, and that's not the case. It's not just one officer or one department. It's about how all of us, every single one of us, have been shaped by the images we've seen, the stories we've heard, and the fears that we've been taught. And with that,
it's from my granddaughter, and it says, JoJo, that lady killed my daddy. And in response to that, I told her God is still in control, and you remember that. I have 4 grandchildren that are at home now that has lost their daddy. I said that I would accept whatever the verdict was, and I'm going to do that. But let it be known that I believe in my heart that Betty Shelby got away with murder. And I don't know what was in the mind of that jury, how they could come to that conclusion. There was precise evidence that said she was guilty.
This is definitely a tough pill to swallow. The facts were there. All the elements of manslaughter was there. Terrence's hands were up. Terrence was not an imminent threat. Terrence did not attack her. Terrence did not charge at her. Terrence was not the aggressor. Betty Shelby was the aggressor. Betty Shelby had the gun. Betty Shelby was following him with his hands up. Betty Shelby murdered my brother. And after she murdered my brother, all of the officers involved with the Tulsa Police Department tried to cover for her. What I got out of this case is that a cover-up was exposed. A cover-up was exposed. And they walked by my brother to go check on Betty Joe. In the last few breaths of my brother's life, he laid there alone. And nobody held his hand. Nobody said, Terrence, or hey, are you okay? He had to lay there alone. And these are officers who are paid to serve and protect us.
So for people who are unfamiliar with this specific case, this happened back in 2016. A man named Terrence Crutcher was walking towards his car in Tulsa, Oklahoma. His hands were up. He was unarmed. A police officer by the name of Betty Shelby saw him, and in her mind, she saw something else. She saw danger. She saw a threat, and she pulled the trigger. Now, what's striking about this case isn't just that an innocent man lost his life. We have plenty of stories out there about this. It's what was caught on tape. From a helicopter circling above, an officer watching the scene unfold said 4 words. That looks like a bad dude. That looks like a bad dude. Think about that for a moment. They weren't on the ground. They weren't being charged at. They weren't under any immediate threat. But before a single shot was fired, Terrence Crutcher had already been condemned. Not because of what he did, but because of what he looked like. And when we started defining what implicit and explicit bias, this is part of the reason. Because this is the power of implicit bias. And that's what Dr. Eberhardt shows us, how the mind, without even realizing it, links blackness to criminality, to danger, to violence. How that split-second association has deadly consequences.
Following the shooting of Sam DuBose by a former UC police officer, university officials say they're taking steps to ensure that all of its officers treat everyone fairly. That includes training in how officers, and anyone for that matter, can have biases and not even know it. Local 12's Jeanette Levy shows us how the school is turning to an expert to help keep its promise.
Dr. Lori Friedel has studied bias in policing for years. She says some people have explicit bias, showing obvious dislike for a certain group. Then there's implicit bias.
A person with implicit biases, we still link people to stereotypes. It impacts our perceptions and our behaviors, but this can happen outside of conscious awareness, even in individuals who reject, at the conscious level, prejudice and bias.
Friedel and her team were brought in to train UC police officers to become more aware of biases they may have following the shooting of Sam DuBose by former UC officer Ray Tenzing. University statistics showed African Americans received 81% of the citations Tenzing issued.
We better know and understand what bias looks like and how we can better handle situations encounters between police and citizens. And so we wanted to bring state-of-the-art training here because our goal is to be nationally the best university police department in the country.
UCPD's command staff is also being trained by Friedel in how the orders that they issue could contribute to certain groups being treated unfairly. Student Alexander Shelton was in the audience tonight.
And I don't know that we actually got down to the root of implicit bias and how that plays with power and how that really intersects with racism and how these systems build upon each other.
Al Gerhardstein is one of the attorneys representing Sam DuBose's family. He was here tonight and he said this was really a good start. And UC officials say it was just that, a start. They say more training will be coming, and that will likely come after that top-to-bottom review that the university has hired a firm to conduct. Reporting live from the campus of UC, Jeanette Levy, Local 12 News. Rob?
And Jeanette, thanks very much. The training conducted by Dr. Friedel is funded by the U.S. Department of Justice. She has trained officers in cities all across the country, including Los Angeles and Baltimore.
Now, this doesn't just happen in one city or with one officer. This is systemic. This is a pattern. And in Oakland, where Dr. Eberhardt did extensive research, officers heard a phrase over their radios over and over again: male black. A robbery, male black. A fight, male black. A suspect on the run, male black. This was hundreds of times a day, thousands of times a week over the years. That repetition rewires the brain. It creates an automatic association. Blackness equals crime. And when that happens, it changes the way that officers see the world. So Dr. Eberhardt interviewed an officer, a white man. He was raised in Germany, who had never thought of himself as racist. But after just a few years on the force, he noticed something. Every time he saw a black man, his body tensed up. His mind raced through possible threats. His hand edged towards his holster. And here's the truth. He didn't want to feel that way at all. He didn't choose to feel that way, actually, but day after day, radio call after radio call, his mind was conditioned to see danger where there was none. Now, some folks might say, well, that's why we need more implicit bias training. And that's a good start. But as Dr. Eberhardt makes clear, education isn't enough. Education alone isn't enough. You're not going to take this class, for instance, and just be anti-racist if you're not a minority. You're not going to take this class and going to be cured of any of the implicit biases that you have. You might be more cognizant of the biases and the explicit biases you have. You might be more cognizant of the implicit biases we have because you, for instance, taken the implicit association test and it brought some of these things to light, but it is not going to fix you at all. Doing training is just not enough. You can't just sit through a workshop, watch a PowerPoint, and undo a lifetime of conditioning. Because here's what we know, right? When police officers are placed in simulations, they are quicker to shoot an unarmed black man than an unarmed white man. They hesitate less. Their reflexes different. That's not about intent. That's about instinct. And instincts, those take work to change.
That major outrage this morning after a behavioral therapist was shot by an officer after he held his hands in the air, lying on the ground, his patient with autism sitting right nearby. ABC's Gio Benitez has more on this story. Good morning to you, Gio.
Amy, good morning to you. That new video taking social media by storm overnight. The unarmed black behavioral therapist shot by police on the streets of Miami. And police say it all started when they got a call about a man threatening suicide. Watch, just moments before the shooting, you can see 47-year-old Charles Kinsey, his hands raised in the air. The video released overnight by his lawyer. Kinsey in the yellow shirt works at an assisted living facility. And the man at his feet is a 23-year-old with autism who ran away from the group home. Listen as Kinsey talks to police. Kinsey even tries to calm the young man with autism. At some point, one of the officers shoots Kinsey, but he survives and speaks with Fox station WSVN from his hospital bed, recounting what he told that officer.
And I'm telling him again, sir, it's no need for a firearm. I'm unarmed. He's an autistic guy. He had a toy truck in his hand. When he hit me, I'm like, I still got my hands in the air. I said, no, I just got shot. And I'm standing there, I'm like, sir, why did you shoot me? And his words to me, he said, I don't know.
Video of the actual shooting hasn't been released, but this is the moment right after. And this morning, Kinsey is expected to make a full recovery. The North Miami Police Department has placed the officer on administrative leave, and the local state attorney's office is now investigating Amy.
Gio, this is so hard for people to get their heads around after all that has happened. Had the police there admitted that now they know this was a therapist and his patient? Where does this investigation go?
Yeah, absolutely. They acknowledge he's an ALF employee. They acknowledge the other one is a young man with autism. And that's why, Amy, this is going to be a very serious investigation. A lot of people asking, how could this happen?
A lot of people, Gio. All right, thank you.
So for those of you who are not familiar with Charlie Kinsey and that whole situation, and even the response from the officer, he's like, why'd you shoot me? He was like, I don't know. This is that instinct that we're talking about. It's an interesting case study to go back and do the reading on and to kind of follow along what happened and what was the outcome of that. So what do? We understand this stuff. We're looking into bias. We understand the police have issues. We have all this stuff that's going on. What do we do? Because I don't know about you, but I refuse to accept a world where a black man standing next to his car, hands up, is a bad dude by default. Or a therapist is sitting on the ground with his arms up in the air right next to his patient that he's looking after because the guy has autism with a toy in his hand. And he's looked at as a threat. I refuse to accept a world like that. We start by recognizing the problem is bigger than any one officer, is bigger than any one police department. This is about changing a culture. We have to rethink how we think about police. That means moving away from policies like stop and frisk, which disproportionately target communities of color. It means changing training, not just in the classroom, but in the field. So officers unlearn the biases they don't even realize that they have. It means collecting data, holding departments accountable, making sure that when there's wrongdoing, there are real consequences. And right now, we all understand that there are no real consequences. Anything can happen, and the taxpayers are going to end up paying for it at the end of the day. And for those of us who are not in uniform, it means looking at ourselves, because bias doesn't just show up in policing, it shows up in the hiring, it shows up in schools, and the way that we cross the street when we see someone who looks suspicious. And let's be honest, this isn't about white people. Implicit bias affects all of us, whether you're black, you're brown, you're Asian, you're Latino or Latinx. We've all been shaped by the same images, the same messages, and the same fears. We all watch television. We are all exposed to media. We are all exposed to the news and to movies and television shows. Even some of my favorite television shows reinforce some of the same biases that we have and that we hold. So we have to do the work. We have to ask ourselves, what do I believe? Why do I believe? And if that belief, if that gut reaction puts people's lives at risk, what am I going to do to change it? Because the choice we face isn't just about policy. It's about who we are. It's about the kind of country we want to live in. And I get it. It is tough, especially considering today's political climate. It is tough. But it's about whether we continue down that same old road or whether we finally decide that enough is enough. So I get it. I know this work is hard and I know it's frustrating. And I know too often progress feels slow. It wasn't even 100 years ago where we were just dealing with civil rights and we were just dealing with getting voting rights and freedom and being on the same level of everybody else and making sure that we can get, the same wages and the same education. It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't 100 years ago. Even Ruby Bridges, who was the first young black girl to go into a school, just turned 70 years old. It wasn't that long ago. Integration into schools wasn't that long ago. So I can tell you this, is that change is possible. We've seen it before. We've seen it in the movements such as civil rights and in protests that demand justice and in communities that refuse to be silent. And we see it now in the young people who are standing up and speaking out and saying that we deserve better. So let's be clear that this fight isn't just about statistics, right? It's not just about bias studies or policy changes. That's what this whole class is not about. It's not just about these things. This is not about just teaching you guys. All of this is about human lives. It's about dignity. It's about making sure that every person, no matter the color of their skin, is seen for who they are and not for the fears that others project onto them. That's a fight worth having. And if we stay in it, and if we push forward, if we demand more, if we refuse to settle for anything less than justice, then class, I truly believe that we can build something better. And we can build it and we can do it together. And that's class for tonight. This was basically the foundations on just what is covered in bias chapters 3 and 4. I'll do another class later on this week that's going to cover chapters 6 and 8. And everybody in my class still has the assignment to watch 13th by Ava DuVernay. The link to Netflix is on the classroom. And for those of you who's joining us and you have not, and you just kind of want to follow along with the class, if you have not seen 13th, you can search for it on YouTube and you can watch it on there. So a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, this is just, it's layers. We're building on the layers and trying to understand what is it about our society, what is it about ourselves when we start looking at our implicit biases and our explicit biases, and we start looking at racism and discrimination and all of this stuff. When we start doing that, what are we going to uncover? See, I would like to continue doing this work as much as possible, because my role is to reach that one person, and hopefully that one person will lead to another person that they teach, and then that person will lead to another person that they teach, and then we have this whole movement of social change, and everybody becomes agents of change. And it's hard to do that in a society where everybody is worried about what's coming next. Are we going to have rights tomorrow? Or are they going to try to deport my friends tomorrow? Or are they going to try to lock me up just because of the color of my skin? Or are they going to try to roll back civil rights and the equal employment opportunity and all these other things? Are they going to come for Brown versus the Board of Education? You never know with the people that's in power, because it's always something. And I know that there's a lot that we have to worry about, but we still have to keep up the good fight. We still got to keep pushing forward. And you have to keep trying. And as I mentioned before, this isn't a white versus black thing. Everybody has been affected in different ways. On the minority side, black people have gotten the short end of the stick. But as I have mentioned before in some of my lectures, this has always been about wealth. And it has been about the wealthy turning the poor whites against the poor blacks. And then the affluent blacks who think they are better than, that turns their eyes away from what's happening to the people that's in their community. Back when Jim Crow and the black codes and all this stuff was going on, the wealthy had to make sure that they kept the poor whites and the poor blacks from being allies, because at one point in time they were. If there's anything, it's that we need to move away from the wealthy. We need to get away from these oligarchs that have basically taken over our society as of right now, because they're going to do their best to turn everybody against everybody else, when the fact of the matter is we're the 99%. We don't even have as much wealth combined as the top 1%. We're nowhere near it, and probably never will be. And so at the end of the day, the 99% of us is the ones that have to stick together. Does anybody have any questions for this particular lecture, or this particular stuff on the books, or even if you don't have anything that has to do with the lecture, do you have any feedback that you guys want to share? Any questions that I can answer for you, so we can, make sure that we're addressing this stuff as we move forward. We want to continuously move forward always. And I'm monitoring the chats on both sides, because I have people that's on YouTube and I have people that's on TikTok. And again, I'm not trying to keep everybody, so I'm trying to keep my lectures shorter from now on, because I know I had a few of them that was about an hour long, but I'm just trying to keep these capped hopefully at about 30 minutes. Because otherwise, if not, then we will have our next lecture hopefully in another couple of days. As I'm still recovering, as my family is still recovering from illness, and we're just kind of pushing through and getting things done. And I'm still going through and grading the assignments and the discussions. I am behind, as I posted in the classroom, but just know I'm going to get around to it. And for those who ended up missing this lecture, or you came in on a tail end, just know that you're able to watch it in its entirety on YouTube. It'll be posted directly to my channel, because I'm streaming there as well. So otherwise, if there's nothing else, then we'll continue with Biased, chapters 6 and 8. Reading this, Sorian said, I did watch 13, and the justice system is a class system. It shouldn't be, but it is, and it's not okay. That's correct. And this is what we were talking about, this whole new racial caste that's been created, which is the majority of it is made up with black people that have been incarcerated. And you saw how we've gone from 370,000 people that were locked up to 1 million in 20 years from 1970 to 1990s. And we're sitting over 2 million people. What happened in this time frame where all of a sudden we have all of these people that's incarcerated? Because the system, these privatized prisons, it's a big money maker. It's a big money maker, and even Congress is in on it because they pass the laws and they invest into these systems as well. This is why I was telling you guys, it's about who has the money. The people who have the money are the people that make the laws. These are the people that want these systems to stay in place because it gets them paid. There's maybe only a handful of people that's in Congress who are not millionaires. And when I say handful, I actually mean more like 2 or 3, if that. Most of the people in Congress, most of the people that's in any type of lawmaking, any of that stuff, they hold the purse. Yep. We have an insane amount of people locked up. The United States holds 25% of the world's incarcerated, despite only having 5% of the world's population. That's rough. There are more people in the United States who are locked up than other countries combined of equal size. And no, the crime does not match the time. This was why we were talking about earlier when we start talking about Bill Clinton and the 3 strikes rule and the mandatory minimums. All of this stuff came about because they were feeding this whole prison complex, the black community pipeline straight to the prisons. This is one of the things that we still have to deal with even today. And it wasn't set up and it wasn't put in place by mistake. As we kind of read, like I said, we've gone through Jim Crow, we've gone through the Black Codes, we've gone through civil rights, and we started talking about this, and you can see the connection to each part. You understand this now as we've gone over the new Jim Crow, those first 2 chapters, and we started getting into Bias by Jennifer Eberhardt. Chapters 3 and 4 and 6 and 8. That's what we're covering this week. And we're watching 13th. And as you understand more and more about the 13th Amendment, just like I did the introduction video the day before yesterday, and that introduction video was talking about how the 13th Amendment is legalized slavery because you have your rights taken away except for those who commit a crime. Unless you're white and unless you're the president of the United States. That's how it works. Because otherwise, people who are convicted, there have been people convicted for lesser crimes that are serving 10, 20, and 30 years in prison right now than what the president has done. And this is the reality that we live in. So this is why I want people to understand it's not always a thing about one skin color against another, one ethnicity against the other. A lot of people have been conditioned. A lot of people have been taught about their biases and they feed into those biases, but we still have this whole thing is where the wealthy is controlling everything. When it came down to Jim Crow laws and black codes and everything else, it happened because they wanted to subjugate people. They wanted to control people. They wanted to be able to lock them up. And once they lock them up, they want to be able to use them for free labor. Just like I mentioned, whether you're making license plates or whether you're fighting fires or whatever, or whether they have you on a farm, it is free labor. And they have millions of people locked up. That's potential free labor. So this is why I want you guys to think about it, not in terms of race and about black people fighting against white people or any other thing. I want you to think about it in terms of the wealthy versus those who don't have the wealth. The 99% versus the 1%. This is why I tell everybody is welcome to this class. Because everybody needs to have this discussion because we all need to be on the same page. And as I also mentioned earlier, you're not going to just, get rid of your biases by taking this course. You're not just going to be cured of whatever type of belief, because it takes work. And this is why I like you guys interacting with each other on the discussion boards and having conversations in the chat, because this is what we start talking about: intergroup contact theory. You change your beliefs by being around other people who are different than you. So I'm not going to hold you guys. I don't want to have you guys sitting up here just staring at the screen or whatever. I want you to be able to just kind of take this information. It's 30 minutes. Even if you can't get to it or you're not online at the time, you can at least join in later, or you can watch it on YouTube. And I'll keep up these lectures. So I'm looking at doing maybe about 2 or 3 a week, just in short formats, so that people aren't getting just kind of drained. And I try to make it a little bit dynamic. So that's part of the reasons for including the videos, in the lecture, just like I was doing with my other lectures. You have the videos, you have something that just kind of talks about it in depth. You have some other case studies that you can look at. I want you guys to be able to even go off of this platform and go over to YouTube or go over to somewhere else and look up this information and just kind of stay informed about what's going on in the world, because things haven't changed, but the reporting of it definitely has. So everyone, you have a good night. Again, if you join late, make sure you go and watch it on YouTube. The link to get to the YouTube is in my it's on my profile. My YouTube link is on there. And if you're in the classroom, it'll be posted there as well. I'll make sure I put a link up for there. And just take care. Y'all have a good night. Because I'm out of it and I'm about to go lay down. But have a good night, and we'll talk later. Take care.